Hello, everybody. Have you ever been stuck in the past? Well, how about if I tell you that you can reclaim your story? Reclaim it by taking power over your story. Today, we're going to be talking about something crucial, and that's something that can shape your trajectory for the rest of your life. The stories that we tell ourselves, the stories that we see coming as human beings, the narratives that we live in. We just don't live in a world that we are just living in, but the world we perceive it as. And your perception is how we shape the stories that we live in, the constructs of our mind. When I think about what happens with these stories, of our past. It keeps us trapped. Our past, your past is keeping you stuck in your present. Well, I'm Dr. Cheryl Clark, and today's session I am excited about is talking about how to get stuck out of the stories you may be telling yourself. So today we're going to explore exactly that. How many stories are you carrying that no longer serves you? Right now, I want you to think about it right now. How many stories have you inherited? How many stories have you been told over and over again? And you have created this response, this hardship, and even traumatic experiences. And I'm not going to take away, and by no means, I advocate for therapy. It's not a therapy session. Keep going to your therapist, your coaches, or whatever you need to support you. But I'm here because I've seen so many individuals and time again that people have been stuck in stories that takes them out of their present. And it's really hurtful because what I see is I see their potential. And it's time for you to break free of any labels, any narratives that keeps you stuck in the past. And as I saw these people that began to move, even myself within a story, oftentimes we give ourselves these labels, right? And whatever these labels are that we give ourselves, and you can't reach our full potential because we're moving through those labels, meaning that the labels of you're so stupid or you're lazy, you're not lovable, whatever it is, you're not kind, or whatever else that someone attempted to shape what it is for you. And these labels, essentially, when I really look at even my own self or couples or individuals that I talk to, families, it often happens in childhood. And these stories, we want to, how we do this is how we treat each other. And essentially, it's a significant part of our lives, these life events that do happen, oftentimes they enter into labels, right? So it becomes deeply ingrained in us. We form these stories, these narratives, and we believe it and we define ourselves by it and all this stuff. So let me give you a prime example. And I always like, so go ahead and get your, I get my pad out. So go ahead and get your pad to write down some good facts that we're going to be I'm going to be giving you today. So you want to get your pad out, get your pen, whatever you're going to write with today, so you could have something. I want to give you what when you're stuck in the past, right? But I also want to give you what is the real definition of this thing, what we call story. Because a story is something that we tell ourselves. A story is a construct of a narrative. So I want you to write down the word story and my story. So the stories are the narratives that we create to make sense of our experiences, our emotions, our interactions with the world. It's our narrative. What is it's our essentially it's our narrative. And our narrative is what tells us what it is, right? Or what's happening. And it's our perspective. It's our narrative. So when we are looking at how we organize the information, organize the events, the sequence of how we give it, the meaning, the what happened, all these stories and what we tell ourselves is an external thing about others that have internal framework that shapes us and how we perceive others in our lives. So what does that mean, Cheryl, and all this psychological jargon I just said, the external and the internal? So the external facts that would happen outside of us, we have to make it all make sense within us internally. So we create frameworks and how we perceive what happened externally, that story, and to make it make sense to us, we shape it. And the perception of what we see, what we receive, and how we perceive it, we give it, we interpret our past to understand our present, to be able to function in our present, and to really to anticipate our future. So then we set up these coping mechanisms that we may not talk or we shut down, and through that lens, we go ahead and now navigate our lives influences by these stories. We even make decisions and our actions by these stories. So when you're in a story, the framework that you're giving it, sometimes as we know, or we may not know, is that, like I said before, our childhood really plays a big part of when it all started, possibly. And these labels that we've given ourselves or someone else has given us, we then move through that and not understanding that we are now the perception of what those words were, we move through those labels. So over time, the labels that we may have given yourself is becomes a significant forming of the narrative that we also give ourselves. So let me give you a prime example. Um, I was often growing up, I was often called stupid by my stepfather, even my mom sometimes they called me stupid. So what happened was, growing up in school, I doubted my abilities. I feared failure, um, and it held me back for certain things. But then I also said I believed that I wasn't smart enough, or I believed that I wasn't able to do it. So I became a perfectionist. I was gonna do it. Hell or high water, I was gonna do it, because eventually I realized this label was not true. It wasn't a true reflection of me. It wasn't true because of the simple fact I was actually doing things that it's just that my mind worked differently. I had to learn how I learned. See, the story that I had to really embrace was that it was a powerful one for me to be able to sit here today. Now, as I sit here today, there's things that I had to identify that will keep you stuck. So today, the number one things we're going to identify what is keeping you stuck. What's part of your story is is keeping you stuck. Now, what do I mean by that? Because once you identify what words or phrases that you hear, you got to write them down because they are shaping your perception. They're shaping your decision making. They're shaping your identity, and it's crucial because it may be limiting your beliefs. So, like stupid was a lazy, that's limiting beliefs of what you are, and how you can transform that is by you identifying where it is that you may be stuck in, keep hearing it, because these old narratives, it's just simple old narratives, it's the way our brains are wired for society, for some survival. And when we're young, we create these stories, but they trickle into our adulthood. As we grow, the same stories just become outdated. So we feel stuck. And sometimes we don't know how to really move past these stories that we've heard. So the power, when we identify where you're stuck at, you're going to have the power See, the power of narrative, the power of the rewrite. So the fundamental concept of the power of your narrative, the power of your story, is that we get to navigate through the story. So identifying where you are stuck at, you got to go through the story. See, these stories give you meaning of your experience. They guide our actions. When you tell yourself, I'm stupid, I'm worthless, I'm incapable, you're not describing how you feel. You're actually outlining the narrative framework that shapes your perception of each situation and challenge you may be in, that locks you out of possible opportunities and possibilities. So let's be clear here. These stories are not just harmless thoughts. They're not. I want to validate that these stories are real to you. They are a powerful force that can either propel you or chain you, trap you in your past. And I'm here to let you know that the real kicker is that these stories that you've created when maybe or actually happened when you were a child in your childhood, when you did not have the tools or the knowledge of how to fully understand the complexities of what happened. See, I realized when my stepfather and my mother and people around me or somebody may have called me stupid. See, the thing is, I understood that they understand now that when you know better, you do better. And at times, they didn't have the framework of understanding their story because their story was they may not have been treated that way. And what happens is those stories from our childhood dominates us in our adulthood and we let them. So why we get stuck in them is we get stuck in these stories because our narratives, how we look at them, seem to be so big. But the human psyche, in order for us to understand how to build a new foundation, we have to look and see that it brought pain, right? And sometimes we call ourselves stupid at times, but in instance, we need to realize that may be an internal label that we're building a new narrative, building this narrative around. And this narrative and this is destructive to who we are to become. So in these narratives, when you're moving in this, you got to look at confronting the story. After you got that, you got to confront it now. So this is number one. And then the second thing is that you got to confront it. Confront the story. Confront this narrative. Because once you confront it, you can begin to see what exactly, how you can reclaim it. How exactly are you now looking at the story that may be outdated? Now, as you're confronting the power of you confronting this, right? And listen, confronting is no easy task. I'm going to tell you that right now. It requires you to go deeper. It requires you to really tell the truth about your story. And the reflection on this, maybe you may have a little bit, the narrative may be a little distorted. That's why it requires you possibly to get somebody to help you maybe pull it through, maybe a narrative therapist or somebody that can be able to pull it out, or someone that can help you in many cases to find what you built on these maybe truths or half truths or misconceptions of your thoughts, because it's really important for you to see how you are framing it, to reframe it. Because the challenge is that you got to ask yourself, what is this really true about me? Because the story is the story based on facts? You got to ask yourself, is the story based on facts? Is it based on a misconception? Is it based on a pain point? Because when you confront it, There's so many things, like I had to confront being called stupid. Now, if you look at me, I'm now Dr. Cheryl Clark. I've accomplished so many things that required my intelligence and creativity. I started to see my story wasn't true. I started to see that just in that, the interpretation of my past, a label that someone else attempted to give me. So reframing your story is shifting your perspective. Instead of saying, I'm not smart enough, you might say, I'm capable of learning and growing. I'm capable. This is not, I'm not denying that this happened in your past, but you're choosing to interpret it differently. What is your interpretation of what was said? What is your interpretation of now what you're going to do? So reframing the story, you always hear me talk about reframing. That's just the narrative. You hitting that right on the nail. Because then you got to look at this, the evidence of the supporting this, right? The evidence is saying, okay, there is a lot of evidence here that I can see that I can refute this. And it begins to give you power instead of seeing yourself through these old labels. And as you begin to recognize your achievements and how you've been moving through, and for you, it may be something, another word. But as you begin to see how you can now shift the narrative. See, shifting the narrative is saying that I'm going to now empower myself with a new narrative and writing a new story. So this is the next thing that we're going to go through. The second thing is you're going to write the new story. And as we write the new story, we're going to look at yourself, and you may need a support system in this, and I would suggest that you get in a group or get a space, because it may bring up some old feelings that you may not thought that you thought they were gone, but they came up. They came up again, and it's necessary for you to actually see it. So creating this new story is, I want you to take this and I want you to look at it like this. This is where I want you to figure out, when you're writing this new story, this is where the magic begins to happen, because you get to define your future. You get to define your present. You actually get to define the past. It's about deciding who you were, who you are, and who you desire to be. So you're looking at who you were, who I am today, and who I desire to be. Now, when you look at this, I want you to actually understand the possibility of you living through this new story is, first, you got to create it. You got to get to the root of the truth. That is the key, getting to the root. It was a reflection of how and the getting to the truth is it reflects of your values, your strength, and your potential. So, for example, my new story wasn't my new story wasn't just that I'm smart. It wasn't just that. My new story is I'm capable. I'm resilient. I'm always open for learning new things. I learn differently. I'm a creative learner. I'm a visual learner. I learn. See, that's the foundation for me to do anything. I set myself up understanding that my new narrative is that I can learn that. I just need to learn it differently. So you need to learn, you need to know that, are you that girl, or you that guy, or are you that person that when you open up a box, do you read the instructions? Or do you pass the instructions and then you go and see if you can look on YouTube and see if you can get a video? I'm that girl. I'm a visual learner. I see what the product is, I go, and then I can put it together right away. It's not that I can't read it. It's just that I would have to read it many times over for me to get it. You got to know how you learn, and then you get it. But you have to know you to read. It's not that you cannot do something. It's about how you can get it. That's my story. Now, when you are looking through that lens of, being stuck, you may be stuck in the past. And it may take you a couple of times over again. This is not a one and done and get it quick. And it's done. It requires you to now live out the new story. That's the last one. Now that you wrote the story, number 3, that's the fourth big thing, is now you need to live out the new story. Because once you live out the new story, you are now getting yourself unstuck about what you have been noticing about yourself. It's not enough just to say the words. You have to live them. See, this is where you can begin to find that purpose and get unstuck with your communication. That's why I said communication is the best thing, because the communication first starts with you. This is where purpose comes into play. This is where you start getting really clear on your purpose. This is when you start to really understand why you are even here, why you're doing what you're doing. It becomes quite easier too when you start to really live in your new story. Because when you're faced with challenges, you got to look and see, what do you do? When you're faced with taking a risk, and how do you move forward in things when life gets tough? See, the challenge is you have to look back at these stories and tell yourself, how are you moving? And am I moving backwards or am I moving forward? If those stories are keeping you stuck, it's time for you to rewrite them. Remember, you are the author of your life. You are that author. Whatever is keeping you stuck in that narrative is an outdated story. And as you confront them and rewrite the new story, you're going to begin to reflect on your strengths. It's about you moving into the capacity of how you learn, how you grow, how you can improve. The new narrative is not just wishful thinking. You have to plan and map out your actions, your decisions in your life. See, the responsibility now is on you. You got to take accountability and responsibility of how this thing plays out. Rewriting your story means that you are now taking responsibilities for my life. And meaning that you are acknowledging, not in a passive victim type of way, but in a way that I'm going to be actively an active participant in my own destiny, in my own purpose. And this is where you can begin to start liberating your own self, right there where you are, because it's your responsibility to take your story and take the power in your hand. Because then you have the ability to change it. You have the ability to curate it. You're the author. The responsibility of taking accountability for your choices begins with you, and it begins to move you forward. When you're living this life according to how you would like to build it, you can live in the old narrative, the harmful, negative things that you've said about yourself or others have said about you, and those narratives that are no longer serving you. So today I want you to accept the responsibility. Do these quick little 4 tips for yourself. No one else can do this for you. Essentially, you are saying that I am standing in my power. I am standing in the essence that I will move through this. And I want you to be the author of your life. Today, make a choice that the stories that I've been telling myself, the stories that you've been telling yourself, I want you to give yourself permission to no longer live in pain, but in power. Those things are not etched in stone. They can be rewritten. And by rewriting them, you reclaim your power of purpose. You reclaim your voice. You chart the new course. You become the person that you're meant to be. You were not born by accident, but it requires you to begin to move through this consciously. You have the ability. I want you to be honest with yourself and willing to take the responsibility of being the author of your life. So take this time to examine the stories. It will be challenging at times, but come back and re-listen to this video and let it support you. Get into a group. That's why we have the Speak Your Power Now community. Because what it does is it makes you understand that this is an opportunity for me to speak my power now. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. And if this message resonated with you, please like, subscribe, share with someone that may want to hear it. And remember that you have the power to change your life. It's in your hands. And remember that your life, you got to reclaim it. The power is in your hand. So I like I always say, remember this thing that your life starts with one single moment. Let that moment be today. Peace, and I'll see you next time.